Okay.
Okay, great. So thanks for joining the session. So today we're going to go through the this following agenda, which is primarily cloud migration strategies, and what are the assessment-based approaches that we could consider, and what are the application considerations that we need to take into consideration before we do the migration, and what are the best practices that we have to this process, and also comparison of various strategies that we have. So, so yeah, that is the agenda for today. So, I'm just summarized all the six migration strategies here. This is all this, even though this is actually derived from the white paper of AWS, but I think the concept is same. Whether it is not just AWS, it is applicable to any cloud for that matter. But these are called 6R's or 6R's or R lane strategy or 6R's. They're referring to the same thing. This is all from white paper published by AWS. If you look at these are six strategies where rehost, um, replatform, repurchase or replace, refactor, retire, and retain. So these are the aspects, but I think we'll go to each of these strategies in detail because it depends on scenarios to scenario. The concepts are the strategies. There's some aspects which you need to know. But at a high level, rehost is assuming that you have a lot of, imagine a scenario where the company is planning to migrate to cloud. And when they plan to migrate to cloud, there could be a lot of applications that be available, which they're using on-premise. It depends on company to company. If the company is small, the number of applications could range from 50 to 100. If it is a medium-sized organization, it could be in less than 1,000. If it is a even more bigger organization, it will be the number of count of applications will be greater than 1,000. So it depends on the size of the organization. But whatever be the size of organization, the concepts that we're going to see will be applicable for any size for that matter. So considering the first rehost, a rehost is primarily a lift and shift of the workloads. So you will not touch anything as whatever is there in on-premise. As is, you're going to bring lift it and shift it to cloud. So no touching or no changes to the application. So that is one strategy. So it can be done either manually or by using some automated migration tools. So these automated migration tools are available in by these cloud vendors itself now. I think the automated migration tools are so far it's mostly migration tools are primarily from partners, but I think of late the last 2 years a lot of companies. I mean the AWS, Azure, and GCP, the hyperscalers, they itself invest a lot of money in either acquiring these companies or investing in the tooling by from R&D itself, and they have now a gamut of automated migration tools within their kitty itself. So you can use that. But whatever it is, this is one strategy where you are not doing anything. You're just lifting it and shifting it to cloud. So no changes as is. Whatever you see in on-premise as is, you'll see in cloud. So that is one strategy. I'm not going into the details. So like I have successive slides which are covering more in detail into each of the section. I'll just quickly give a glance. So replatform is lift, tinker, and shift. So that is the strategy. So which means you will not make major changes in this process. So for example, if in on-premise, let's say you're using SQL Server. Uh, so if you're, let's say if the client want to move to AWS, then RDS is the equivalent. Like RDS supports Oracle also, so or SQL Server also for that matter. So uh, so so earlier in on-premise you are using Oracle server, and here in Amazon when you move to AWS you are going to use RDS. So it's a basically you are changing the database from your on-premise to a managed equivalent service on the cloud. So basically it's a minor change where you're going to change the database credentials from server on your on-premise to your details on cloud. So you'll have configuration changes. But they are all very minor. So it's just lift, tinker, and shift. So basically, part of the applications will be moving to manage services in this process. That's what this is replatform. This is one strategy, and repurchase or replace. So this is a scenario where uh, you're replacing uh, uh, your on-premise application, you're and also dropping it and then shopping for a new product. So it's mostly the SaaS products. Let's say you're assuming scenarios like, let's say you have a sales, you have a HR application where you have an in-house developed HR application, but that, let's say you want to move to cloud, and let's say you decide Workday is one of the popular HR management systems. So probably you can move to Workday is a SaaS product. Similarly, CRM, you're on-premise CRM. Let's say you decide to move to a SaaS Salesforce. So this process you will ignore your on-premise application, and you will look at what options to buy this SaaS product, and then integrate that with the existing cloud options. So here it is more of you're replacing you're replacing your existing application, and you're shopping a new product, and using the SaaS product. So that is one strategy. And the fourth one is Refactor. So this is a somewhat costliest operation where you wanted to re-architect the application. You don't want to move this application as is. Probably your example is like, let's say you want to consider the cloud native features. And your existing application is not a cloud native. So then in that case, you have to convert that to cloud native, which requires a re-architect, and the architecture, and then probably migrate to cloud. And also other examples like probably the monolithic applications migrating to microservices. This is also a refactor scenario. So here this requires a change in the application, and you're re-architecting the application, so that you get a better advantages when you move to cloud. And this is also one of the recommended approach where when you do this process, you are utilizing all the cloud native features, and also the scalability aspects, and all. It's all inbuilt in cloud native, so you get other advantages like auto scaling and other aspects. So, but of course, there's a reward on the other side, but also there is an effort before that. So you need to re-engineer your application, so that sometimes could be a daunting task as well. So that is a refactor is one approach. And the other two are like very retiring. So one is like retire is kind of get rid of the application, considering that you don't see a business value in migrating those applications to cloud. So probably there could be other like it could be even consolidation also. It could be possible like when you consolidate two applications into one. So it is always a candidate that one application can one or two applications could be retired. So because you already consolidate that feature to some other application. So in that case, you will retire the application which you don't think will add value to moving to cloud. So that is a retire scenario. And the last one is retain. Retain is either yeah. Usually you do nothing in this process. You retain your application after doing some analysis. There could be a lot of reasons where you think this is the scenario could be like the application is very legacy, where it is where cloud is not supporting that OS, or very legacy OS, or a very specific technology where you can't get the advantages in cloud. So you decided to retain it, or probably revisit that later, considering there is not a highest priority right now to move to cloud. So those are all. The primary thing is a retain. So summary. So these are the various cloud migration strategies that you consider. So of course we can go into detail, but the success slides. But any questions on the slide before we move? Okay. And if you look at this is what AWS recommends in terms of the cloud migration strategy. Again, this is even though it is AWS specific, concept is same whatever be the cloud it is. So as a first step, when you start thinking about cloud migration, the first initial steps would be to discover, assess, prioritize the applications. This is a crucial part, because unless you do the discovery, uh, and assessment, you'll not you'll at some point you might think, let's say if you miss anything here, once it is going live, if you figure out, it will be too late, right? So this is very important phase in this cloud migration phase, where first you need to discover, assess, and prioritize the applications. And it is always important to spend more time in this stage, so that you don't miss out on any applications or dependency applications because there's always in bigger enterprises there's always people move in and out. So we don't know some application where we'll be using it, but we don't know whether who is supporting it also. So sometimes it is always possible to miss out on some applications. So that's why it is very important to assess and ensure that all the applications are captured before we have complete inventory of all your application in your asset landscape. So that is part of discovery phase, and then once you discover the applications, then you need to assess them in terms of what is your you have like what are the inventories and how many people are there and what are the geographies that is the applications are used and what is the infrastructure inventory. So all these things you need to gather, and of course then later you need to prioritize the applications. So the prioritization decides which application should move to cloud first. So that is what is prioritization. So once you do that, the next step would be to determine the migration path. This is where this all the 6 strategies that I mentioned will come into picture. Rehosting is like lift and shift scenario. So this is where once you decide on applications to go under the rehosting strategy, so you have two options here further again, either manual or an automation option. So manual, so basically you're taking the application as is and manually you're installing on EC2 VMs, and then also doing the manual configuration, and manually you're deploying your code to the EC2 VMs, and then the usual step of the validation, transition, and moving to production will happen. So, but if you take the automation approach, that is where you use migration tools. So you have a lot of migration tools from AWS or any cloud vendor, and using these migration tools, you do most of the migration, and then again the same process like validation, transition, production. Coming to the replatforming category, where you do lift and reshape. In this category, you need to determine the new platform, and of course, you need to modify your underlying infrastructure. But you can also use this migration tools in this process, and then the same process of validation, transition, production. There's repurchase, where you're actually replacing, like these are SaaS products will come into picture. So you decided to use Salesforce or Workday product. So you decided to purchase the COTS commercial off the shelf solution, and then or a SaaS solution based on the licensing aspects, and then you manually install and set up the application, and then the same process applies. And this refactoring, this is the costless operation where you are decide to rewrite the application or decouple the applications from monolithic to microservices. And so this requires some redesign of the application, and your application code development is required because you decide to re-engineer it. And full application lifecycle management as in SDLC lifecycle begins. And then your integration aspects you need to consider, and then visual validation transfer production. So other two are like the retain. You're so basically decided not to move these applications or retire, like you're going to decommission those applications. So this is a high level flow that you need to consider. So
So what is that manual thing? I mean, I didn't. So
oh yeah,
what is?
so rehost is like lift and shift. So assuming that you have an application that is running on your on-premise, you take the binary of, I mean, you take the image of this and then deploy it manually onto EC2 VMs. So basically, you're doing it manually by taking an image and then using that image to create a VM. I'm just giving an example. So where you're doing it manually, taking an image from your on-premise and then installing them on manually installing them on cloud. But this automation, there are other tools which can also do this for you automatically. So either it's a choice where you can either decide to use this migration tools, which can um, do this taking the image and then setting up an equivalent on the server on the cloud. So either you can do that using migration tools or you can do it manually also. Meaning, you got an idea, right? I mean, assume that you have a VM, and this is a rehosting is like lift and shift. So lift and shift strategy is where whatever is there in your on-premise, you're exactly going to follow the same environment in cloud. So you will not even change anything. So the easiest approach is to take the snapshot of the VM on-premise and migrate to cloud. So in that process, you can do the same thing by manual ways, or you can also use the migration tools. Clarified?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, once you see the migration tools, you understand what are they offer, and how it adds more value compared to doing it manually. So yeah. Okay, so yeah, so what let's say yeah, these are the migration strategies that you need to consider. But I think there are a lot of things that you need to look at from assessment aspect as well. So when you do assessment, I think this I'm talking about this first level. Once you discover the applications and then you want to do assessment on your application, the assessment is very important aspect where this is where uh, this is where your as a as a cloud consultant, or your cloud migration expert. So your expertise or the resource expertise will come in picture. So here in this process, discovering is something that your enterprise should do and identify, because you, as outside person, as cloud consultants, we will not have the knowledge of what is there in the enterprise. But of course, you have to probe a lot of questions and get answers to it, and to ensure that you're discovering you're discovering all the applications. But the assessment is where your forte comes in. So in this process, assessment based approach, you have to do financial assessment, security assessment, compliance and regulatory assessment, your business assessment, technical and contractual assessments. These are some things that we should keep in mind before we ensure that your assessment is complete. Ensure that you cover all these topics. So, I mean, the financial includes, of course, the transactions, like are there any contracts, or are there any obligations in terms of moving these applications to cloud, security related assessments. So are we covered everything from security aspect in migrating the applications? Compliance, like this Europe have especially Europe has a lot of compliance aspects that you need to consider, GDPR and other things. So your business assessment, getting approved from business and ensuring that we get a buy-in from all the business units for this, and there's nothing. What is the what is if partly the application is moved, what is the impact? What is the impact, and if you're completely moving this up to the cloud, so what is the impact? So you need to do some assessments in terms of that. Of course, technical assessments and contractual assessments. These are something that we need to do. And ensure that you give a lot of insights to the team also, and ensure that these are all assessments are covered, because there are a lot of templates that are available in these cloud vendors. So we can cover use that, or a lot of checklists are also available. So you can use that as well to ensure this assessment is done. Um, and coming to this application consideration, so at this point you're complete the assessment, and now we are going more in terms of application aspects also. So because this application consideration gives you a decision making on uh, the given application comes under which strategy of R. I mean, the 6 R's that we saw. So these, if you get answers to these questions from application perspective, so this will help you to decide this application will fit under which R after of the 6 R's. So, for example, what is the application roadmap? So, if you know that if there's not a big roadmap for this application, probably a retirement could be one option, or uh, rehost as is, because you don't know what is the future roadmap for this application. Probably whatever is there as is, you just migrate to cloud with the rehost option. So that way your application is there still in cloud, um, but you're not putting any effort to tinker it, or to re-architect it, because you don't know the roadmap, because you don't spend money if you don't know the roadmap, right? So this is one. These are some questions that you need to get answers that will help you to fit this application into one of the R's. Like what are the costs associated with this application? So, and what are the improvement options are available to enhance your service? And are there any risks for not making any changes to this application? And where does this application align with the technology goals for the organization? So these are questions that you need to get answers either from the business units or from enterprises, and help them to decide to map this application under which are 6 R's. I mean, these are just high levels, so, but I think there could be some details, but these are high level questions that you could consider. Right. And then next thing, coming to the mapping drivers to the strategy. So if you see a graph in terms of x and y axis, where x is the migration effort from low to high, and also the business value or business agility or value that you get if you put that as a y-axis from low to high. So this is where all the 6 R's will fit in. So the retire and retain are obviously less migration effort, and of course they have less business agility because you're going to retain this and retire this application. And similarly, if you see the higher migration effort, if you see and having a lot of business value is refactor and re-architect. So re-architect is something that you can get a lot of business value, but at the same time, migration effort is also high because you need to redevelop almost your this application to support the latest features. So and refactor is something is in between, and the main aspects that we need, important aspect is rehost and replatform. So if you look at the rehost and replatform strategies are having less migration effort and immediately they're giving business value. So which means these are the two strategies. Let's say you have a urgency to move to cloud. So let's say you have a data center, like a contract is coming to an end and in 1 year or so or sometime, and you need to decide or you need to extend this contract or not. So there are some conditions where you have to make a choice where you need to immediately move to cloud for whatever be the reason. So for such cases, it is always good to consider rehost and replatform strategies because the migration effort is very less for rehost category and replatform category, and immediately you get the business value. Probably once you migrate to cloud, probably you can also think to move to this refactor re-architect strategy because rehost is like lift and shift as is. So immediately you can migrate to cloud with very less effort. Probably once you move to cloud, you can also refactor them later. So that could be one added strategy that would help. So yeah, so answer very important point that we need to keep in mind is any applications which require immediate attention or immediate migration to cloud, probably these two are the best strategies to consider. So, so and also, I mean, there's always a debate here. Why shouldn't we re-architect it? Yes, we can re-architect and move to cloud, but it requires a lot of effort. So that justification is something that as a consultant we need to provide to the business folks. Right. So yeah, let's get into the specifics of each of these R strategies. I think the easier ones are the last two. We quickly see them. So retain is mostly the scenarios where you decide to retain this application, not to migrate to cloud. So in that case, mostly they all come under the category either mostly the supported is the OS is not supported in cloud. Like for example, very old Solaris version of OS was one example, right? So some of the, I mean, most of the Red Hat and Linux versions are all supported in cloud, but there could be some operating systems where may not be supported in cloud. It depends. So there are a lot of cases, especially Solaris is now getting improved, but I think in cloud support. But I think this is one area where Solaris is not having good support in cloud. So our very older versions of Solaris are still not supported in the clouds. So in such cases, it is not possible to move them or migrate them to cloud. So in that case, only option is to retain them on their on-premise, right? And next one is this legacy
Solaris
applications.
won't go. So
Sorry.
I think the Solaris is strategically they won't go because it's Oracle. So
Yeah,
because Oracle don't have this strategy of their own cloud, which is lagging far behind, I think Solaris basically lost the race.
exactly. Yeah, that's true. And but still, the enterprise, lot of very old systems are still in SOAS. So in that case, they are no category to cloud. Are probably a multi-cloud strategy with with OCA Oracle Cloud is one strategy. But yeah, but mostly such cases probably it depends. I mean, for example, Azure has a good support for Solaris. So yeah, there are good tie-ups with some clouds. So yeah,
Say
that
this very different. I think most of us probably know is a distinct strategy from proprietary systems and proprietary architecture. Companies like Microsoft came out and embraced Linux and the Azure, whereas companies which are once famous for things like Solaris, which was much more open, and they were brought by Oracle and they get into kind of enclosed box. I think The one's coming up from ashes, another one is going from top to the bottom. Unfortunate business scenario.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yes. Yeah. And so typically these are like unsupported OS could be one scenario where you decide to retain, or it could be very legacy where and it also doesn't have any value to moving to cloud. So that could be one reason where you consider retain strategy. So if you look at this diagram, I think it is mostly your on-premise scenario where when you decide to migrate, just I just put this because you need to when you decide to migrate, these are the areas that you need to consider. What is the CPU required for those applications? What is the memory requirement? What is the network and NIC requirements? The drives, disk drives, and of course, when you these are the like typical compute storage networking aspects, right? So and apart from that, you need to look at what are the disk volumes and operating system files, and your application binaries and the user data. So these are things that you need to consider. We need to look. We need to have an inventory for all these things, which should be coming as part of your discovery phase. So you should also have all this information because this also will help you to decide what are strategies that we need to look at. So yeah, so as part of discovery phase, ensure that you have all this information in hand. So right, and then next is the retire strategy. So retire strategy is a scenario where you are like you decide to retire this application and not to move to cloud because there for various reasons, like probably the duplicate resource due to merger and acquisitions. Let's say you decided to, we already have like there's a merger and acquisition happened in an organization, and there's a duplicate system that you found, and you want to move only one application to cloud, but not the other one. But earlier, like you're still maintaining it, but when you decide to move to cloud, probably you want to optimize it there. So in the process, you move out of the two duplicates, you decide to move one, but the other one is still there, which you want to retire. So that could be one scenario, like consulting HR apps after merger and acquisitions. Or it could be the resources part of the existing decommission program scope. So this is already decommission program planned, and these resources are part of that, and then you decide to retire that because that's one one point where you can decide to decommission it. And output will are even the cluster hosts for DR purposes. So that like DR purposes, most of the enterprises, big enterprises, they have DR applications. So they maintain it still for audit purposes. But those are our best retire candidates because in DR is a different strategy in cloud. So you don't need those DR apps that you have on premise. So that is one area, one set of applications that you can consider retiring are alternative high availability hosts. So there's a lot of high availability. I mean, in on-premise in landscape, your high availability is different compared to what you see in cloud. So the cloud has a different high availability sets, and because it's mostly managed by the cloud vendor itself, so you may not need these high HA related apps which you have in your on-premise. So those are best candidates that can consider for retirement. Yeah, so these aspects are some decision makings that you could consider before you migrate to cloud. Next is a rehost. Rehost is where I think you wanted to move this like the lift and shift category. So you want to move these applications from your on-premise. You want to rehost them to cloud. Let's say Amazon EC2 is one example where you want to migrate all these applications to the cloud. So what you do is you take the backup of all your on-premise stuff. It could be in terms of disk volumes and operating system image backup. Take the backup of all this from your on-premise and migrate them to new disk volumes on cloud. So so that way you're just doing a image copy. So from your on-premise to a cloud. So and you get all the and then the cloud you get all the cloud resources like CPU, memory, and all these things is cloud resources. But only your image is what you get from your local from on-premise to cloud. So this is one easier approach to migrate. So that's why it's called lift and shift is the easiest strategy to migrate. Of course, it has some negatives which I'll cover in the other slides. But this is something that the effort is very less here. Especially, for example, servers running on package software. Like you have most of the bigger enterprises, they have jars. For example, I'm just giving a scenario where there's no code, but they're just using binaries. It is very well possible that in bigger enterprises, it is possible where the person who worked on it is not there, but the application is still working somehow. But you don't know where the source code is. These are very common scenarios that you could encounter. For such cases where you don't have source code or a package software where you're still using, so those are best candidates to move to cloud. I mean, where rehost strategy would be the best fit, where you can take a copy of it and then migrate to cloud. So, and like in this case, other scenarios are like applications without an active roadmap. So these are the perfect candidates for a rehost category. You take a backup and then move to cloud. So that way you are getting the exact copy that you have in on-premise in cloud. So and especially the ad hoc dev test environments. So you don't know whether these dev test environments are required or not. You can't make a decision whether to decommission them because for whatever be the reasons. So in that case, rehost is the best category. So because the dev test environments would have done a lot of effort to set up those environments, and repeating that in cloud in a re-architect strategy would take a lot of time. Or re-platform category will take some time. Then in that case, take the exact copy of it and then move to cloud, so you get the exact replica in cloud. So yeah, so those categories where rehost will be perfect fit. Uh, but here, if you look at the work-wise, so which team is heavily involved, like the rehost strategy, where you're just lifting and shifting. The infra team will handle most of the work. When I'm talking about infra in terms of the cloud, so cloud infra team, because it's just image copy that you are rehosting on cloud. So infra team will handle most of the work in this case. Of course, there'll be application team wise. Of course, there's a lot of testing effort that will be involved. But testing is the only primary effort from the application team or verification team. So, but most of the work will be done by infra team in the rehost strategy scenario. Right. So, I mean, generally, the infra team will set up, take the copy and set up there, and then they say it is okay. Go ahead, please do the testing. The application team or the verification team will do the testing to ensure that nothing is whatever is in cloud is working fine, and it is working as is from like what you how you use in on premise. So that's how the this Rego strategy will work there, right? And of course, there are a lot of pros and cons in this Rego strategy. As we look at the pros, right? I think you're just taking the image and migrating to cloud, so it is very speed. I mean, the speed is you can quickly migrate them, so the speed of migration is faster, and of course, the reduced risk of migration. So the risk is less because you're just taking the copy and moving to cloud, and availability of tools to natively support this migration strategy. So a lot of tools are available, to, I mean, we saw that there's Yanni has a question about like manual and automation. So this automation, this is just like taking copy and then moving as is. So a lot of automation is there in this for this category. So you need to break ahead here. So even for infra engineers, even the work is more for them. There are a lot of automation tools are there which can help them to migrate them faster. So, and also this migration could be an application, hypervisor, and a physical hardware agnostic. So it is agnostic of your application or hypervisor that you use on on-premise. So because you're just taking image and then moving it, so it's not a migration to be easier here. To think about hypervisor, what is the physical hardware here and there. So all this you've got to need to worry about. And also like a lot of automation is already done, and you can rely on this automation aspect, and tooling is also available, so this assistance is there for you. There's already tested products, and the support for migration of system with configuration. So this migration, even it will take the configuration aspects also in for this migration. So that is the beauty of this automation tools. So it's not just the binaries of the image. It is also copies the configuration. So that way your migration is comparatively easier and smooth. So these are the pros in this rehost, this different shift process. But if you look at the cons, rehost is not OS agnostic. So you will retain the same OS and same settings in the target environment. So why is that a cons? Because whatever is the drawback that you have in your on-premise, you're carrying those drawbacks into the cloud as well. So probably the design is not good, or it's not appropriate OS, or it is very old OS. You still using the old OS, even though there is a latest OS available in the market. So your whatever is the negatives that you have in your application, you're still taking them to cloud as is. So you're not solving the problem. So that is a from that perspective, it's a cons. You also you may not use this cloud services that you have that you get the operation scale aspect because if you look if you're let's say you're doing if you're using Oracle on your on-premise, if you take the image, your Oracle image is also coming here. So that way, but the advantage of that is, of course, you're getting the application setup, but but you're using the you're not using the cloud provided scaling aspects that you get from RDS or any of this cloud, Azure SQL or Cloud SQL. So you're not getting all this managed as databases or cloud services features because you're just copying it. So those are one of the cons. And of course, inherit the potential same application performance characteristics because you're copying as is. So you're just copying what are the performance characteristics what you have in on-premise. It's not going to change anything in cloud. There is just a copy. But I mean, there are a lot of expectations that and from management that when you migrate to cloud, you get a lot of potential good improvement, performance improvement will be there. So those are some expectations could be there. But those are things in rehost you'll not get any such advantages because it's exact copy from your on-premise. You're not doing any tinkering there. And also, you don't get to retire much technical debt. So if you have any technical debt in your on-premise, you are taking as is to cloud. So you're not solving your technical debt here in this process. So yeah, these are some of the negative aspects in this rehost category. Look at the best practices, right? I think so. From rehost perspective, a lot of partner tools and ecosystem that is available, which will help you to increase the velocity of this migration. So utilize them as much as possible. I mean, go for a automation approach here, not the manual approach, and also evaluate and understand your infrastructure environment. It's very important because I mean there are scenarios where where it's at times when you decide to migrate, the migration. Uh, let's say on the day of migration, right? So you have to parallelly the system I need to handle parallelly both the migration and also access the incoming traffic. So it should do both tasks at the same time on the cutover day. So it's very important to understand and evaluate your infrastructure very well, and so that you can plan well for your storage and network aspects. So because the cutover could, if it is happening on a weekend, that is good. I mean, yeah, but sometimes these cutovers can span more than uh, uh, more than a weekend also. So in case at some point you might have to consider systems to accept incoming traffic and also uh, at the behind the scenes this migration also happening, so that you are not losing the incremental data that you right? And then challenge yourself to improve the architecture. In the rehost, it is all so good practice is to even though you are copying as is, more of the infra side. Look at any slight improvements that you could make. Like for example, it could be as simple as like, is this port really required to be open in cloud? Because you opened it in your on-premise, this could be closed because it is not really required. So like such smaller improvements, take a look because you're just copying it, so you need to consider such improvements before you migrate, and also access migrations before doing a cutover. So spend a lot of time, a lot of exercises you should plan before you do the actual cutover. Right. So these are some reverse best practices. So, sir, any questions here so far? Okay. So let's move to replatform. So here, replatform strategy is basically you're changing, you're making minor change, not a major change, but it's a minor change. For example, let's say change the operating system or a DB engine. So, so you're on premise. You're using an older Windows version, like let's say you're using Windows 2003 or very older version. But probably when you migrate to cloud, you decide to use the latest Windows version. So this is not exactly your not making any changes to the application as such, but you are changing your operating system or your DB engine. So like minor changes is what is this replatform is. So in this process, you're upgrading to latest release of an application. Could be one scenario, or upgrading the OS from Windows, like whatever I explained, or probably upgrading from Oracle 8 to 19C, which is the latest version, for example. So these are the various considerations that you could consider for this replatform category. So if you look at here in this replatform from your on-premise, when you migrate your app and binaries user data, so that will be there. But the underlying, you get a fresh new operating system and a new volume disk that you get. These are some changes in this category. And here, infra team is also there, but I think the most of the work is also from the application team. So application team will have a lot of work to do in this process. Of course, they need to ensure that this OS is all tested well, and the application supports in all the cases and there's a performance impact in this upgrade process. So all this there's a lot of work from application team also here in this replatform category. Of course, in this sorry, I think you should change here. So replatform category is the pros and cons if you consider here. So if you primarily yeah, so here in the pros, if you look at so- yeah, the pros if you look at uh, options to use these cloud services that are close to existing infra without requiring code changes. So it is very important to look at like these cloud services like Azure SQL or AWS RDS or Cloud SQL. So these are the important aspects that you could look at this process. And you get all these things require just a configuration change, but there's no code change required. So because you're changing the DB from old to new, so it is just a DB server details change or user ID password details change. That's all at the max. So you do not have any code changes there. Those are some pros. And also no dependency on operating system or hypervisor or underlying physical hardware platform. Migrating to newer platform or OS or DB, this is the advantage that you get. But also opportunity to utilize modern OS features. Because since you migrate to new platform, you get a lot of like you get the advantage of using the latest features. And of course, a lot of tools are also available to migrate, complete this process. If you look at the cons of this replatform category, so some replatform projects may be very time consuming and costlier because you're let's say you encountered performance issues or if you encountered any application changes which are complex, then it requires some effort in this process to ensure that development is complete and then testing and ensuring they're giving a sign off. So it will take some time. So it also require both the existing and new environment to run in parallel. This adds complexity also because since till you confirm that your new application is working fine, the older also should run in parallel. Older environments also should run in parallel. So that requires some effort, and also a lot of planning is and coordination is required because the application team is also involved here. So we need to look at the logistics aspect in terms of availability of the resources and other things, not just infra process because the other Trios is just most of infra side, but here application is also additionally involved. So yeah, some logistics planning is also required for this platform getting. But if you look at the best practices in replatform, so evaluate your code dependencies on operating system because when you upgrade the operating system, your code sometimes may not work as expected. So evaluate that before you start the journey, and also look at identify what modifications are required in the code to port it to the new operating system. So do some due diligence on this and then ensure that they're clearly documented. So a development porting would require any functional trade-offs. So sometimes it might have to functionality aspect, even though you get the advantage, but is it really required to get the functionality if you're not really using the functionality? So consider all those things, and and communicate all the trade-offs with the user base and also with partners. Ensure that those partners also should know that there is some upgrade happening, because partners sometimes they might be using a third-party application from based on your application. So they should also be informed in this process, because once you decide to upgrade the operating system. Also, whenever possible, break up the each functional component and test them individually. Let's say you decided to, examples like, for example, you decided to do OS migration and DB migration for an application. So don't do it together. So first complete your OS migration, test it, sign off, and then do the DB migration. Because sometimes we don't know. Some error happens, we really don't know whether it's because of OS migration or DB migration. So there's always some confusion there. So yeah, don't mix it up. So, and also consider this hybrid environment and plan your migration appropriately. So also, yeah, their environment are running in parallel. Consider the DNS switch method post successful testing. So there's always scenario where this at some point this is one scenario, and the replatform is one scenario where you need to run your old on-premise and also in cloud for some time in parallel. So always consider DNS as an option before, so that your switch, because on the day of cutover, where you decide to switch from old to new, uh, so in that case, it is just easy if you have a DNS in place. So you can just switch, like probably you can consider O53 as a DNS option. So that way you can easily switch over from old to new. So consider that, because this running parallel will come in this replatform scenario. Right? Any questions here? Okay. So next is this refactor. So this is a lot of changes are required here, because you're changing your middleware to be one option, recoding your application components, and also changing your application code, utilize your cloud native features for performance, scaling, and agility. Also, your microservices, monolithic to microservices conversion could be one scenario here. So here you're talking about refactoring your application completely. So monolithic to microservices is the best case where you are changing your application before you migrate to cloud. So that way, this involves a lot of effort, but of course, there's a lot of value once you migrate to cloud. So the advantage, the pros, if you look at, of course, you get a new lifetime, and also because it uses the cloud native features, you get the efficiency and the cost aspect advantage that you have. And of course, the refactor strategy in application code OS hypervisor, it is completely agnostic of it. Flexibility in porting, and adaptive to modern consumer needs and better consumer experience. So these are some pros that we get. On the con side, this could be complicated because you are changing your architecture. So which means this requires a lot of effort. Um, so it requires a very good understanding of all aspects of the application, compliance, regulatory, security, code design, and others. That's why it is very complicated. Expensive also sometimes. Migration timelines could be extended. So all these problems will be there. So additional resource requirements will be considered by the business. So these are the aspects that we have in refactor strategy. Here, if you look at the best practices here, so scope your refactoring initiative to the desired business outcome. So I mean, don't make it as a re-engineering project. So just restrict to what you want to refactor. So I mean, of course, once you touch it, you can touch everything. So, but that is not the goal here. So keep your scope very clear, and just touch that, not the entire thing. So, and don't make it as a re-engineering project. So that should be very clear when you work on this refactor assignment. So and make sure your code is working as expected, and of course baseline the current functionality and features, and make sure that you have documented all the test procedures for regular testing for each component of your code as you don't see this refactor. So this testing procedures are very important, and of course a lot of tools are there to help you there. But of course you should ensure that your typical testing is all clearly documented. And let's say since you're refactoring it, this is one place where you could introduce a CI/CD practices if you don't have it already in place. This is one opportunity where you could introduce a CI/CD practice. This will help you for the project team itself to allow them to complete quick development, testing, rollout, and rollback. So this will automate all those processes with the CI/CD practices, and also break each refactoring down into small projects. So I mean, more of a microservices concept. Uh, don't take big, split that big into very small. Ensure that the code is delivered and matches their desired functionality, and also use automated refactoring if there is one available. These are some things that we need to consider. For example, if you're using C++, is your app which is allowed to use Lint or Visual Assist or Visual Studio. So these are some refactoring tools that you could consider in this process. So refactoring is not easy, but it has a lot of business value. Then then this is the re-architect. So this is where you decide to use a SaaS product or a COTS product. So by replacing your on-premise application. So in this process, I mean, you could also look at purchasing a cloud-compatible license, which is very important. With the SaaS product, even though most of the SaaS products support multiple clouds, but still ensure that you know the licensing aspects of the SaaS product in cloud, and also changing from disk to x86 is very important. So some of the SaaS products they support x86, which is a very good architecture, but sometimes if you're on-premise on RISC pattern, so then we should consider changing that so that to ensure that we have the details of the architecture. And changing the application components will also come into picture. It's not just a SaaS product. Even though once you procure a SaaS product, there will be a lot of applications which we talking to SaaS products in terms of data pushing or data fetching. So you should also change those. So consider that as well. And also rebuilding your application architecture is also will come into picture here. So this is a re-architect background. It's not just buying a SaaS product, but integration aspects also has to be considered. So that is what important here. Of course, that the pros in these cases are eliminating the dependencies on the custom hardware or proprietary technology platform. So that is one pros that you're getting. Like you're completely eliminating on the custom hardware, and with the replace strategy, no infra to maintain, which is good, and also pay for what you use with SLAs. The SLAs are provided by for the SaaS product. SLAs will be there by the from the vendor. So that can be considered here. So those are some advice that you get in for that is re-architect buying the SaaS product. The cons, if you look at careful evaluation of partners or vendors required because the SaaS partner ones, whatever the partner that you're looking at, and you should also look at the other vendors who are supporting it. So so some partners may not be supporting, or some vendors may not be supported for the particular cloud. So you should do a lot of careful evaluation before you move to this. So that requires some effort. So that has to be considered. And some re-architect use cases can grow in time and effort uh, because you're actually doing integration of the SaaS also. So it comes, even though it is just a SaaS product that you're buying it, but still like there is a lot of effort in terms of re-architecture, in terms of integration. So that is other cons here. Of course, data migration is also still required because that even though you're buying a product, you need to migrate the data from a legacy to your SaaS product. So that also has to be considered. So the best practices here, if you look at a variety of options, not just from technical perspective, but also from partners' perspective, integration with partners, financial viability, security, and compliance and regulatory aspects. So the technology is not only criteria that we need to consider when we evaluate the SaaS product. So and also build and run in parallel. So even though you have SaaS product, but run both your on legacy and SaaS both in parallel for some time, and identify the options to keep data between on-premise and newer system in sync. So this is always you get the data in on-premise. Primarily we were on-premise, and then we sync to behind the scenes to the newer SaaS product. So keep it that way so that you see the value over a period of time, and then you do the complete migration, the complete switch over. So and here the test functionalities in batches, which is very important. So do. It's not possible to test everything in one go. So test them in batches, benefits versus sign up versus payroll, exactly. So and also identify the user base. Then we'll be testing each functional components for the new system and migrate them in batches as well. So yeah, so these are the aspects that we need to consider for the refactor strategy. Summary. So if you look at the we look at all these patterns. So if you see the time, if you look at these values in terms of time, cost, and agility. So these are the, I mean, each symbol denotes the time it takes. For example, from time perspective, you have more numbers here. The five symbols here. So refactor is the one which takes a lot of time. Um, and also the next is replatform. So refactor and replatform will take a lot of time. For example, obviously the rehost is comparatively lesser time. The cost wise, you can see the refactor again is having a higher cost, and agility perspective, you have a lot of agility in the refactor. So if you have to summarize this, if you're looking for more reward, then refactor is your choice. But if you're looking for a balanced solution, probably rehost is the strategy for you. So it depends on how much money you plan to spend and how the urgency that we have to migrate to cloud. It depends on all these things. But yeah, summary is if you want more reward, then concern refactor. But if you are in urgency and want to take a balanced decision, then rehost is good because once you it's a rehost lift and shift. So once you move to cloud, you can re-engineer it later also. So refactor, you can look at refactor or replatform configuration once you migrate to cloud also. But rehost is a balanced solution. That, cool. So I think that's all I have. So any questions here?
Yeah. So that's good. No risk, no reward. Okay. The more risk
Yeah,
you take, the refactor, cloud native, Kubernetes. That's how the Google promotes their thing actually in this whole thing. Their thing is in the multi-cloud, cloud agnostic. All those things are happening on the refactor side. It's going to be
yeah,
expensive for sure.
yeah.
Actually, there was a myth in the Kubernetes. People think Kubernetes is going to solve all the problems if they come in. It solves some of the whatever those auto scaling and those kind of things which are proprietary between Amazon did it 10 years before and all these guys catch up on those EC2 machine auto scaling things. Now that became a commoditized product. Yes, so Kubernetes gives that feature, but you have to upkeep with the installation and migration, and it is not a simple task. They need to have one dedicated person, full time or more than full time, to take care of all those landscape and so on. Yeah, so refactor is rewarding with a lot of risks. That's what it is.
Yeah. That's all. Probably what I will add the next session is primarily what tools are available in each of these cloud vendors landscape. So of course, a lot of AWS has a lot of toolings in this space. Azure has Equent and GCP also has Equent. Mostly, I mean, the database migration tools are available in all the vendors. Database migration is the easiest migration or automated way of doing it. It's not just DB migration, you also need to do server migration. So the server migration, there are a lot of tools in cloud in terms of server migration. And also, it is when you have if you look at the initial slide, there's a discovery phase, discovery assessment strategies. So discover, assess, and prioritize. So discovery and assessment itself is a bigger challenge. I mean, there are tools, even though it's not matured, but I think there are some tools available from the cloud vendor itself to identify this task. So I mean, it looks simple, but I think if you look at VMware is one of the popular vendor. I mean, a vendor who most of the enterprise they have, right? So we need to look at licensing aspect. and also it's not, and Linux is the most used operating system in enterprises. So like again, there are a lot of layers in Linux. So how to handle that? And also there are ERP systems, CRM systems. So so a lot of things are there. I mean, SAP, if SAP, it's even more effort. So now SAP is now more or less supported in all the clouds. SAP is having their own cloud, but still they are now supported in all the popular clouds also, the AWS, Azure, and GCP. So there's a lot of SAP is not an easy thing. So SAP is one of the complex data migration process. So there's a lot of tools around that. So yeah, so it is. There's not a one tool which fits for all, but I think but the tools are evolving. So but we can take a look at what tools are available right now, and how are they in terms of like what features available, and in which scenario what tool could be best fit. So all those things we will see in the following session. Yes, I think that's all I have to share today. So anything else we can discuss?
That is better. I would say that is the இதை நான் மேனேஜ் பண்ணிக்கிறேன்
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any experience or the thoughts on the time frame and implementation, timeline, things like that? Have you come across?
Yeah. I mean, the timelines are, yeah. I mean, that's what the one of the strategies will help you to decide the times also. So if you I'll share my screen back. So if you look at, it, I mean, most of the common patterns that we saw, or at least from what I heard in the discussions with a couple of clients which I interacted so far, is that um, they they have they have data center licensing that is coming to an end. So probably in 1 year time. So they come with such timelines. So when but at the same time, management decide to move to cloud. So so uh, so so when time is critical there, so probably your rehost or replatform strategy would be best fit. Um, so if you're looking for, if you look at the time frame, so this is what it is. So if you have less time, then probably you should look at reverse and replatform as your immediate strategies, because you get your because you're referring